Should be hopped.
Okay, we are ready to go. Let's call this special council work session for April 24th, 2025 to order. Everybody present, please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Because this is a work session, we'll just jump right into new business. So first and foremost, we have a discussion and possible vote on recommendation or options of coverage for the sheriff contract. So I guess we'll open it up for discussion. You guys have questions? You have something you want to say? What are your thoughts?
So one of the things, regardless of what level we play at, is what the scope of work would be.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just state ordinances, state law, or is it inclusive of city ordinances? And then services apart from law enforcement, which have been done in different capacities and in different ways. I think they call them courtesy services, whether that's a wellness check or a parade marshal or things like that.
Well, even
Most of those.
even patrol, they are not required to patrol by state law. That is a service over and above
Mhm.
that we get.
And from what I've told, they haven't been patrolling.
Very little.
Yeah, and that
Yep.
came from the sheriff's department.
Yep. And I mean, so I guess, yeah, so what I had written down is the sheriff is required to respond to all Montana code violations. Like they right now are a responsive department. When a call comes in, they respond. So things that we used to get over and above were patrol, traffic control, like for parades, for or even they even would sometimes partner or work with the megaloads when those were coming through, welfare checks. Things of this are services over and above that they provided that we paid for. So that was part of the 180,000. That was part of the hours. And I would say if I were to go to them, there would be city ordinances that I want enforced. I don't think, this is personal opinion, I don't think we're ever going to get them to do animal control. And part of that is they don't want to, but also we don't have a facility for animal control. And animal control is extremely hard. I actually had this conversation with Big Timber. They have a private person who does it,
Mhm.
and they have a facility. And she said before that, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do animal control. And I mean, so my question then would be if we go to them and we're saying, hey, we want a contract for 400 hours a month, and we want to make sure that these city ordinances are enforced. Great. I need a list of those ordinances. And if you see it, and as you're going through ordinances and you see ones that are outdated or need to go, let's get rid of them, because our ordinance book is huge compared to cities our size. The other thing I would say is there are things that the sheriff's department does as a courtesy to our town that maybe there are better entities to take care of. So dispatch can take it, but then instead of a deputy going, maybe it gets referred to mental health. Maybe it gets referred to an organization better equipped to deal with that call. And if they're like, no, we want to continue to handle those, then my response would be, well, then those need to not be part of our contracted hours. If that's something you want to do, then
So with this contract, kind of off topic of that,
okay.
are we amending the current contract we
No.
have
That
We're
is
starting-
out. We are starting
from
from
scratch?
square one. Yep.
So has anybody drawn up an outline of what we want it to look like
Well, that's part of what we're doing here.
as far as the wording of it?
Well, even what we would want.
Because a lot of the information in there is pretty well set, but if we made amendments to the wording, stuff that we want to change in it, I think you pretty well have your base there.
And we could,
So why don't we go through that line by line, be like, yeah, we're gonna keep this, or no, we're not gonna keep it, or
okay,
that,
Do you have
that at
that
least
on-
gives us something we can present to the sheriff.
I don't.
This is from 2017.
hmm
That was the most.
Yep. Whereas. Um,
Well, if we're going to make amendments to that, then before we ever present it to the sheriff, it would have to go to the lawyer.
Yeah.
And so,
so essentially it says they do their job as laid out by the state of Montana.
mhm.
Then it says,
Title 4 and Title 10. And so,
Which I don't believe either one actually exists in our code
That's,
as,
I pulled up our stuff online and it doesn't show there.
Yeah.
We go from 3 to 5.
so those two codes don't exist in our ordinances anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could strike that right off the bat.
fourth, okay, so you'd have to correct the titles we want covered, which goes to which ordinances we want covered,
Right.
okay? And it says it excludes, animals,
hmm
domestic wild or feral. Although in the past they have responded to wild.
Well, and wild used to be the purview of the game warden, but we don't currently have a game warden.
So here's the interesting thing, game wardens are not responsible inside city limits. Nope,
See, and that's not what
like
the,
for, pest control, people call for skunks. Now they have.
oh, okay,
Offered as a courtesy to trap those out, or.
Right.
But as a courtesy, because they're public employees, they fire, but if they're not
Okay.
responsible, cities are responsible for their pest control. And like Dave Weedham was pest control for city of Kalispell,
Right.
after he was game warden.
See, and I wasn't thinking of things like skunks and raccoons. I was thinking mountain lions, wolves, bears, moose.
Most of that's. just
Species of
wildlife
interest?
parks, isn't it?
Yeah, the game warden
Yeah.
is the law enforcement officer responsible
And
for,
they refer those, refer those regularly.
okay,
That's not, I'm just saying, but they have also responded in partnership with that as well. It just. Sometimes it's hard to draw hard lines, to be like, oh, what are we doing? And then it says Shoto will provide administration for non-public safety ordinance violations. So this means, so when we look at this, this would be like junk vehicles, but here's the question to the council then, how do we get our health and safety things enforced? If the sheriff's office is not doing it, how do we propose to do this? Because the quality of life, this is pretty high quality of life for people in Shoto. They would like curbs cleaned up, they would like fences mended, they would like not junk to be looking at junk, but we currently have no enforcement for any of that.
well, and junk
So we
vehicles
want
actually
to-
fall under the sanitarian.
They actually don't. They have a budget for the ads to advertise for the service to remove. But we did follow up with the sanitarian and they do not have the authority to remove them, but they can advertise removal voluntarily.
Interesting.
So we're still,
And they have a huge budget for advertisement, which would lead one to believe that they could remove them. But only if you call them and ask them to, being the owner of the vehicle.
so we still almost need somebody to do code enforcement.
Right. So
For
that,
us,
I mean,
or
this is my
no.
concern, is like you can spend all this money and still not have the quality of life things that people are still asking for. And so that's my question also to the council, where, how do we then get that done? Because when we had a police department, they then scooped up those pieces.
Right.
So,
Now. So police department is gonna cost us almost 3 times, well, at least twice.
I'm not asking for a police department. I
Okay,
said, how do
okay,
we propose to
got
do
it.
it?
Okay,
Let's be
well, I
clear
was
on
just,
that.
I was just making
Nobody
sure.
wants a department.
Good.
I said, how do you propose to do it?
Got it. Okay, I was making sure we were on the same page.
Yeah, no,
Nobody
I
wants
think
that.
we all understand that the police department's gonna cost.
Okay, so that is completely off the table. We're not asking or
Yeah.
rebuilding a police department. Perfect. Okay,
How do we get our quality of life ordinances fulfilled? Which are most of the ordinances in there.
so,
That's construction, that's your curb, that's your animal waste, your whatever you've piled in your yard that your neighbors have to look at all the time.
well, and how many of those do we write letters for, Tom, from this office?
Right now, the last several years, I feel like mostly all we do is the grass and weeds in the summer.
Okay,
and respond to job complaints. We haven't really sent out anything considered for like junk vehicles or, you know, trash in yards.
Okay.
Because most people don't respond at all.
Yeah.
The last person I sent a letter to said, "You're picking on me. We all have 2 vehicles in this house, so we have 10 vehicles lined up along the street." And a lot of people, they immediately go to like, "You're picking on me."
Mhm.
Don't tell me what to do.
Well, and as long as they can start the vehicle, it's not a junk vehicle.
We have asked the sanitarian to look at your vehicle. Hard for a vehicle to qualify because of all the things. But I don't know for sure if he did qualify one as a junk vehicle, if he would have it removed, or if he would tell us to have it removed.
So is there anybody that can write citations and then they just take it up with municipal court?
We had tickets, we had been recently told not to give tickets out because of liability.
Yeah.
So we pretty much have to send stuff up to our criminal or civil attorney and ask them to follow up. And some people have gone to court, they get slapped with a small fine, they pay it and go right back to what they were doing.
Mhm. I mean, so for enforcement, and we are limited on what we can fine people. I mean, was it $253 or something?
$5 to $250.
Yeah. I mean, and most people are going to pay the fine and keep doing what they're doing. And so until it becomes criminal, enforcing civil ordinances is hard, which is part of why they didn't want to do it to begin with, is because they spend their time running around and then nothing actually gets
Mhm.
done by it.
Yeah.
So I mean, and there's something to be said for civic pride. I mean, maybe instead of asking the sheriff to talk to people about junk vehicles and weeds and like that, we start doing Shoto beautification. We lead the charge as the city and start helping people and encouraging people to do that. And you're going to have people that aren't going to step up. You're going to have people that they rent, they don't care. You're going to have people that own the house and don't care. But if the majority of it is that way, what are you thinking?
I'm just running some numbers, because it does say later on, no responsibility for non-public safety ordinances.
Mhm.
So, I was just running, numbers, because when in the former agreement, it had 24-hour day law enforcement service,
Mhm.
but 84 hours on duty and the rest on call.
Mhm.
So,
So we have the ordinances, no way to enforce them.
We could do a better job, I think, of policing ourselves. And even as city council members, we could advise the city to write a letter. And we could run it through our attorney if it was an actual violation of an ordinance that would stick.
I think it gets very tricky though, because we're the legislative branch. I have no interest in law enforcement branch. If I did, I would have signed up for a different job. And I think keeping the separation of powers is really important. Whoever's enforcing should not be legislating.
Well, and that's where the enforcement comes through here. I mean, because Chris wrote letters, Jack wrote letters.
I'm not saying that we personally as city council
Yeah.
members write letters.
Right.
If we bring these concerns that are happening in our ward to the city writes a letter. We work through our attorney to see that we can get these infractions taken care of
So
through the
What-
civil attorney.
what's it cost us to run those through our attorney as far as hours?
Depends on. So we've got a rooster right now that she's got. Would she say 18 hours? No, 8 to 12 hours in.
Yeah, the one over there.
Yep.
But luckily, Gen Stats is 30,000 a year.
It's not hourly.
Contract, but our civil attorneys are usually by the hour. Sometimes we build in a max per month rate in there. So they tend to be a little more expensive.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's costing us money to tell people follow the law.
To tell people to be good
Whether we have
citizens.
an ordinance officer
Yeah.
or not, it's gonna cost us money to
Yeah.
get people to be, good neighbors and good people. If that's the way we decide to address it.
Polly, did you have something you wanted to say? You unmuted your.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Because I was wondering, when we get this arrangement with the sheriff, is he still gonna keep score and send us a monthly tab on hours that he's worked, or how can we predict how many hours we're gonna utilize him?
So in the considerations that Keith gave me, I mean, it would be an annual meeting no later than February 15th for annual review of the status of the contract, how many hours they served and possible needs assessment.
It's after the fact. I mean, that's long after the month has gone by.
Right. So my understanding from Keith when we talked was if they're at their 400 hours and a call comes in, they're not going to respond. You know, and maybe, and I can ask that question. So if we're at 400 hours and we need traffic enforcement and we need, you know, a couple other things that month, do they just eat that and we renegotiate it the next year? Or so I will write down what happens if we go over hours.
Yeah, they're just gonna be an average of the whole year. Some months are under, some months are over.
Yes, your shower is now ready. Please proceed to shower 3.
Okay. What else?
So it seems that someone needs to be in charge of triage on these calls that come into the sheriff as to which are worthy of their skills and which aren't worthy of their skills.
Well, and I don't want to micromanage them, but as I said, I mean, there are calls that they take that they could give to different agencies in Shoto. Now, whether or not those calls come in during normal business hours, I don't know. But I could find out. I mean, if
Because I know our citizens seem to think that, you know, when in doubt, call the sheriff,
yep,
rather than considering other avenues like going next door and knocking on the door. But maybe that's a matter of education.
maybe.
Okay.
After that, so the total. Tom, was our last fiscal year was closer to 187 and change that we paid for the contract year.
Last year was,
It was 180. What?
yeah, 170 something.
178.
And it would have been like 182.3. Yeah, I knew there was a 3 in there.
Last year, 176,000 was the contract.
Okay, so with the inflation, it would have been 182.
182.5, yeah. And this year it was a 4.1% increase because of the
Cola.
federal COLA. Last year was actually an 8% increase because of federal COLA. It's usually a 3% increase.
So if you take that 182,513 number and you look at a 2026 3% increase. Is that the number we'd be looking at? What's that number? Sorry, the number.
186. Are you doing it, Tom?
182,513 and then a 3%.
3% increase would be 187,989. 188,000, 3%.
Okay.
Increase.
Well, that would be a good number to start, just a base number would be somewhere between the 188 and the 240. To kind of just give us a place to start. and give us a good. We're putting forth some good effort, and we're gonna revamp the contract, and we're gonna throw up some olive branches, and we're gonna start working together and reviewing this on a yearly basis. Is that too much to ask?
So you're saying we make an offer and see if they take it or if they counter?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at like a 215? Because that'd be almost right in the middle.
Where's the difference in the money gonna come from?
Well, that's the next item. We have that much that we could squeeze out of the general fund for a year. If that's what it would take to get something in effect, so that we have time to find the money, either run a vote for a levy or create a special assessment district to I mean, and we could just do a really basic contract with them similar to what we had, and then go through the ordinances and everything over the next year and go back to them and be like, okay, this is what we want. This is our a la carte. So where does that fall?
Yeah, cause at the 400 hours, what they're asking for, that's 60% increase.
Mhm.
That's a crazy number.
So they have been putting into Shoto so their contracted hours for Shoto for that contract were about 4,032 hours a year. And in 2024, I think is where these numbers came from, they put in almost 7,400 hours. So what's that increase? If I could type, I would have it for you.
54%.
Yep, 54%,
So
50, almost 55%. So that 400 hours,
We're gonna have full-time deputies all year,
just for us,
just for us.
mhm,
which would put a tremendous burden on the county.
mhm.
What to do with the $400? How did they come up with that?
So-
I mean, they're working 11 hours a day in this town, doing what?
So that includes, what's the word? Not research, investigation.
Investigation time.
That includes all deputy paperwork having to do with calls in Shoto. And that doesn't include Keith, Mark, or Clint's time working on any of those things. It also includes, I can get you the list, John. What they usually send us for a call report is what, 10, 11, 12 pages.
Well, that's not what shows up in the docket.
No,
I-
the docket is.
You're right. And the doc,
snippets of what happens.
yeah, the docket is snippets. Those are just the calls that they responded to.
And it's.
That doesn't include patrol hours. What's that? Well, yes, but that doesn't include all the patrol hours. That doesn't include the investigation for those calls. That doesn't include travel to and from.
Where's anybody patrolling in the city of Shoto? Where's the patrol coming from? I don't ever see any of them.
Well, they haven't been because we haven't had a contract.
They haven't,
Contract for a long time,
Yeah.
and they never showed up anywhere. This was the last 3 months, and they're digging this out. You know, sign that we didn't have the contract before. I don't know what they're doing 11 hours a day.
okay,
Get it itemized,
Mhm.
write it up, get it itemized, let me see it.
okay,
And I don't know, I'm not for paying somebody something like that.
Well, they have been providing us dispatch logs and call logs. And they've been providing us paperwork, reams of paperwork.
Yeah.
At every council meeting,
and I,
where they go and what they do and what
By deputy.
by deputy.
by deputy and how long it takes them and how long they,
I was thinking about, a statement that Shauna made a couple of months ago about some of the, dispatch calls that they're required to respond to everything that comes into dispatch, and I wondered if there was some way to reduce like a triage does in a hospital, you know, so that some of the really unnecessary, errands that the law enforcement is called to do, where, for example, a mental health person might be better. So could we outsource some of those, little?
well, and that was one of the things I was talking about is there are calls that would be better served by a different entity. And so I would have to go look at Montana Code Annotated. They're required to respond in some form. And so, I mean, talking somebody off the ledge, yeah, but if somebody needs counseling, our sheriff's deputies aren't counselors. So referring them to a counselor
And
is,
that's so valid, Mary, and that's a conversation with the county
Mhm.
about, because that is their work and their scope of work.
Yeah.
And so, and they would have to have arrangements, memorandums of understanding and services and whatnot, and fee structures for the people they call on. And one of the things they shared with us, that's really important, is getting a well-trained public. This is something we can't touch. People have to, because people have involved them in non-emergency custody cases,
Right.
parenting plans. And they're a half hour into a call because someone said so-and-so stalking me, but it's actually a parent conflict that doesn't require anyone to touch it.
Right.
It's two people just having an argument, right? There's no harm, no foul. But they have logged already 30 minutes to 60 minutes of time because they were called to the scene in an emergency.
right.
And so having a public that doesn't rely on the sheriff's office to solve their domestic disagreement over who gets the kids this weekend is really important.
So it's training the public. It's also having those resources available for the dispatchers to hand out to the public.
Yeah.
Which, and I'm not saying they don't, I don't know if they do or not.
Dispatchers do a lot of triage.
I-
They're highly trained.
I realize that.
So we cannot speak to that. That is a conversation with the county.
right.
What
And
we- what
and it
we
is a
can touch
conversation I will
whether-
have with the county about if it's getting done. But it's also something we need to educate citizens on is, hey, there are these other entities that you can call that aren't the sheriff's department, that they aren't charging us hours, they aren't charging us time for. If you have a mental health concern, call the health department.
But these $400, the county work is included,
What do you mean?
the $400 that they're.
What do you mean by their county work?
For example, going to look at a cow that got on the road or something.
Mhm.
No, not if it's outside the city of Shoto. It's the 400 hours is just just within the city limits of Shoto. Yes, yes. Yeah, anything outside Shoto's city limits doesn't count toward those 400 hours.
Plastic cow.
The domestic calls,
Domestic calls are scary.
yeah, and the problem is like Heather said, you're a ways into it before you realize, oh, this isn't something I can deal with because I don't have the information or I don't, for whatever reason. And so then they have to refer it, but they've already spent 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half.
Before they can cut themselves loose and be like, oh, actually, this isn't our deal.
Yeah,
We've already logged 90 minutes to the
Yep.
city of Shoto for it.
Yep.
So yes, there is that piece. So I can see that it is the will of the law enforcement committee and the majority of council at this point to proceed with the contract with the sheriff's office. I am, however, deeply concerned, and I'll just state this for the record so that it is clear, I'm deeply concerned that the sheriff has been short for a long time as a county department, and the commissioners have not bolstered him. Not with their PILT money, not with the excess that came out of the nursing home, although they will build him a coroner's room. They have not bolstered him up. And my concern is that always a population density, which Shoto is going to require more services than Collins, Montana, than Bynum, Montana. That is a fact of budgeting and public service. And so when we make this good faith effort, I expect to see the county come back with something really spectacular in supporting the sheriff, because Shoto has done everything that people have asked. We have held public meetings. We have put together a committee. We have taken recommendations. And all I've seen the commissioner say is, go along, Shoto, go ahead and fund the sheriff. They have not stepped up to the plate themselves, even when I have gone and presented as a council member and a citizen to say, what are you doing for your sheriff? They're like, not our deal. Okay, so I want to be quite clear. I still feel this is the county's responsibility to provide the bulk of a county sheriff, especially when he says, when they say in here, we're not doing non-public safety ordinance, then why would a city hire anyone? If all the ordinances are covered by state that are criminal, that's already covered, regardless of boundary. And that is the sheriff. The sheriff has the beautiful job of being the most powerful person in any county from border to border, regardless of city line. Okay, this is clear. So why hasn't the county stepped up and supported him in his border to border work? Okay, so I want to just be clear before we proceed. I'm unhappy with the way it has gone, but if we are to proceed, my next request, given that we're going to say, okay, what is our hours? What are we going to do? The next thing is I will not tax the public without their permission. So when we decide to move forward with more money at the tune of, it's at least $50,000 more a year with no additional services, I need the public's permission to say, okay.
Okay.
Because our parks are falling down and we didn't give them 50 grand. We gave them 2 this year, 2 additional. Okay. So when we say the quality of life is our parks, it is our trails, it is our streets, everything gets consideration. But in this conversation, it's only law enforcement that's getting the money and the consideration. I am weary of the amount of time it has taken out of personal and public life, and that it is drug on to say this is the only service that is valuable to Shoto, Montana. It's not. There's a lot of people, a lot of volunteers propping up everything else. And so I want to just acknowledge that and just say it so that it's out there. But if we're going to proceed, let's say then, how are we going to pay for it? What is our number that we can propose and how are we going to pay for it?
Okay, so do I have a motion from you then?
Sure. We gotta start
Just
somewhere.
bring, yeah, what number?
We've gotta start, let's start 215.
Okay, it has been moved that I go to the sheriff's department with an offer of $215,000 for a contract. Is there well, on a contract yet to be determined or on the old contract?
On a contract to be worked going forward, because I think that they need to have a voice at the table.
Okay,
And we've talked this to death, and
Okay.
we've had meetings, and we've had,
It can reflect, I mean, if they have not indicated that they would like to do any city law enforcement.
Mm-mm.
None. So I think the contract remains essentially the same, the numbers change.
Okay.
With the adding of absolutely the annual review, and we have the law enforcement committee now.
Mhm.
well, I don't think the contract needs to stay the same. I do think that we need to tweak that contract. We need to come to they
Okay.
do need to,
Okay.
they're gonna have to give us a little more for
But I think
what that'll.
I think we're gonna have to take a contract with them saying this is what we want. Here's what we propose. If you got a counter to it, give it to us.
Okay, so an offer of 215 with a contract to be worked out, taken to the sheriff as an offer. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that I go to the sheriff with an offer of 215 with a contract that we will work out. I think the contract needs to be worked out before I go to the sheriff,
Yes.
at least what we want, and then they can counter
with the contract draft.
Right. So
Okay,
it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
so what pieces would you specifically like? Can you speak to the pieces?
I would have to have it. I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but
Because it's only 6 pages. It's a lot of whereas.
Oops. Which is legalese for if it's
Defined as-
if then statements.
It's got.
Mel,
$215,000, which would, for the course of a year, be 3,307 hours of service at the rate of $65 per hour, which was the rate that they quoted us. And so that's 275 hours a month. Is that really what you're envisioning?
That's what I was trying to calculate cost on them. That'd be half the hours than what they quoted.
how many months did you say, Mel?
Be
You said 3307.
Like, that's about 275.
Which would be about 22% of our average annual revenue.
I just wanted to make sure,
Mhm.
because
So it'd be less hours.
and I'm only asking you what Keith has given, what you brought back was the rate is $65 an hour, and we need to determine how many hours you want.
and if we can't come to any kind of agreement based on that number, then we will have no other choice than to go
To arbitration.
towards a
Mhm.
levy. And it needs to be a countywide levy, in my opinion, because I agree wholeheartedly with Heather that we're all gonna have to step up together.
And looking at what the average cities our size spend is between 10 and 13% on law enforcement. And this is 22% is what we're offering.
Which cities where are you getting
It's
those?
just national average.
Okay, so I would tell you that Montana is
Well,
higher.
I'm just saying, national average is between.
Isn't everything?
Yes, well, it's part of the price we pay for being rural, for enjoying our space. Is there are fewer people and things take more time. Yep. Yes, Mary.
The advisory board is doing to help you out with this.
So what they have done is they've advised and that we, yes, well, and they can't negotiate.
Right.
Theirs is to look at data and to honestly, it was another party to go and ask questions and get information from the sheriff that other than being taxpayers didn't have any skin in the game. And so they got their data, they presented it, and they said, here's our suggestions. I don't think so. No. But they haven't met. February? Is that the last time they met?
I think that's the last.
Yep. Yeah, but we're still working on acting on their recommendations, so.
What were the recommendations?
Yeah,
What did they
that's what I was
recommend to?
Pay the bills, make a contract.
They recommend that we keep paying them at a rate of $65 an hour for all their hours
But they didn't have any.
and get a contract as soon as possible.
Well, they advised either a special mill levy, which would go out to the voters, or we create a special district, which doesn't go out to the voters, it goes to public comment, and we create it, it would be based on front footage like streetlights and tree and sidewalk are.
Is that even
What?
what you just said?
Oh, the
Yes,
special improvement
the
district.
special improvement district is the purview of a city. We haven't made one since 2006 when we created the tree and sidewalk board. Yeah.
Sorry, that's worked out.
The tree and sidewalk. So,
Taxpayer.
okay, so how do we, so my question to that is how do we educate the taxpayers? How do we talk to the people and let them know, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we would like to do, this is why we would like to do it. I mean, if that's all on your ballot, are you gonna read it?
No, it's just for levy and for not. The ballot
Right.
is for or against.
Right. So when you get your voter
Doesn't-
information packet, do you read it? I mean, that would be my question.
Have to go to the voters before you ever
Okay.
even think about an election.
Okay,
You're gonna have to explain yourself and then decide.
right. And what I'm saying is, how do we explain ourselves? Because if it's not, if it can't all be on the ballot, if it's in that voter information book,
Got who on the ballot.
that's what I'm saying, Pete, is so how do we get the information to the people so that they read it?
Maybe they won't come.
Pete, we have had public meeting after public meeting. It's the same
I've
6
been
or 8
around this
people.
town a while, I've been involved in politics a while.
Okay.
40 years. this
I
town.
agree.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
And how many
Yeah.
people do you see show up at these meetings? Not
Yeah.
very many, not ever.
And so we hear you guys that are here, and thank you. And let's hope that,
We're down with KRTV, we are having a special.
We have
meeting.
begged people, we have stopped people on the.
I don't
and
think people watch KRTV anymore.
But actually, people actually attend meetings online.
Yeah,
Like there may be 3 in this meeting room and 600 streaming on Facebook.
well, it's just the three of us right now. But
But you
anyway,
look at the
so
regular meetings.
the,
We're gonna give what we can give.
Yep.
We're gonna do what we can do. And then it's gonna be on the sheriff's office and the county to come back. This probably is just gonna be a little nugget of what they want. And if that's the case, then we will have to go for a
But-
countywide levy and a countywide vote.
but we are doing what the people and the board have asked, and we are trying to move forward. So we will put the ball back in the county's court again. And when they kick it back to us, we'll have to have another meeting. But it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, is there any more public comment
The
or
discussion
discussion?
was what parts to change, because if you're gonna draft, did you have sections you need to
You
change?
know,
Well, so.
we just gotta start over. Cause like you said, there's just a lot of whereas and what, and there's a lot
Which is
of what.
required in contract.
Right,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of what they won't do,
Mhm.
but I do think we need to start talking about what exactly our expectations are.
And I think the biggest difference in the contract would be, that doesn't say how many hours, it just said provide service.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it needs to include hours,
Or that's.
scope of work.
I just want our message to
The
the law
increase.
enforcement community to be one of support, that we do support them. But for the money and the effort that we're making here, we want them to come back with more. We want more services, we want more protection, we want more visibility of them on the streets.
Yeah, Pete.
Comment on that? Suggestion I would make would be a long head. You know how many dollars and start
Mhm.
for this reason. You got a water project, sewer project.
Yeah.
A flood project.
Yeah.
And all knows what else is coming at us as far as
Yeah.
taxes. But when I'm single, I'm getting on in years, unemployed, got fixed income. You're not gonna be welcome to take many more of my dollars, if any. So start with dollars.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I will take you back to the very first contract. I was sheriff when that all started. The very first, 1972. Yep. So here's what happened. City council got together and decided they didn't want a police department, went to county commissioners and offered $25,000. Guess what? They walked out of there with a fund.
Mhm.
Wrote them a check for 25 grand, not knowing it wouldn't even hardly pay the salary of one person.
Mhm.
So those of us that were working,
Mhm.
worked 2 shifts,
Mhm.
8 for the city, 8 for the county.
Mhm.
At that time, it was not legal to pay deputy sheriff any overtime.
Oh.
Couldn't do it, state law wouldn't allow.
Mhm.
So I had to go in every day through those guys and say, hey, come on, 6 days a week, so we're gonna have to work.
Mhm.
That's what it was when there were a few days it was in place before I got there, but that's what it was 2 shifts a day, every day, 6 days a week.
And I would tell you, Pete, that we wouldn't be using as many hours if everybody felt the way you did in 1973.
Why?
That if people would
Work together.
be good people and work together, then we wouldn't be in this pickle.
And part of it, functioning of all this, we have plenty of time to do all of this communication. Everyone.
Well, and
Didn't have to worry about it. They basically did school zone stuff,
Mhm.
different things around town, day and night.
mhm,
They only worked part-time, there was two of them most of the time, sometimes there were two. Yeah, so we balanced
mhm,
jobs to the dollars that were available. And over the years, it raised, finally it got to the point that I couldn't take my guys through what we were doing any longer, went to the council. Said, we gotta have more money. They, no, you don't get any more money. So they started their own business. You almost said somewhere in mid-conversation that it would cost 2 to 3 times as much to have your own police department.
Mhm.
Could I see the figures that you have used to work that up to where you have that thought?
I will go back and find them, yeah, because we worked through them in 2022 or 2023.
Because the rest of that is this. Successfully, you can't afford 24 hours around the clock enforcement. You
No, we can't.
So you gotta start with the dollars,
Mhm.
make the job fit the dollars. You have to.
And
There's no other way to do it.
and that's what I will go
And
to the
that's
county
what-
with is what we've got.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you're
So-
almost-
I think those numbers are like $750,000 for us to.
I want to say 628 in 2022, but I will go find them, Pete. I think I still have that paperwork.
How many
um,
hours a day did you figure that into?
It was 3 people. It was 3 people with I think 2 reserve, and these are just off the top of my head, but it was 3 people with 2 reserve providing 8 hours on weekdays and on-call coverage on weekends.
2 to 3 times as much as the sheriff's office?
Mhm.
Because we have to have cars, we have to have equipment, we have to have
Realize
everything.
I know about the expense part too.
Well, and if you like, I can talk to a couple of the police department. I can go talk to Fort Benton, or I can go talk to Conrad that have departments. Yeah.
Say, if you're gonna have to start with how many dollars.
Mhm.
And are the taxpayers willing to pay it?
The Conrad Police Department spends over $600,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. And I think Fort Benton they're close. So anyway, so the motion was that we offer a contract of $215,000 with the contract to be worked out.
Mhm. That was-
So the contract being done is not part of the motion. So I'm gonna ask the question, those in favor of going to the sheriff's department with a $215,000 contract with the specifics of the contract to be worked out, please signify by voting aye. Okay, those opposed vote nay. Motion passes. Did you get that, Tom? Okay, so this one should be really easy. Because it sounds like everybody's in agreement. So discussion and vote on the recommendation for a voted levy or a special assessment district to raise the money. Now, and maybe we don't have to do this for this $215,000 contract, because Tom and I were talking, and that extra money is in the general fund
Awesome.
me sitting in this chair, I would be willing to do that for a year before I mean, so that we can get our ducks in a row, so that we can get the information out to the public, and then look at, hey, we want to do this going forward, not putting all the strain on our general fund, and then talking about a levy or a special improvement district. So
So how many dollars do we have left if we spend that 50 down, that 75 down? If we just front the money without asking the taxpayers what's in our reserve then? Like,
So right now, the general fund has 280,000 in reserve,
okay,
which we need for emergencies,
right,
but we can spend some of that down. I can also move some stuff out of the general fund, but then it's just gonna go to water, sewer, garbage, street.
mhm,
But then those funds are
at risk.
at risk.
My concern being with the federal government and the chaos that it is and
Mhm.
water improvement are very essential water infrastructure, which is not yet to every city street. I don't know if people know this. On the southwest side, there's no water service all the way to Seventh.
Mhm.
There's not. People have lived here for 2 or more generations with no city water. That is a priority. Okay?
Mhm.
If the federal fails, it's still on us to come up with water service to our citizens.
Mhm.
Okay? I feel very uncomfortable putting all this money out, just saying, well, let's cover it. And not knowing if we have all our funding for the year. The
Okay, so,
engineer says there's no word. But things are moving faster than lawyers can move right now. So also we have lights are coming up, water fees are coming up, and what's the other one? Tree? And Parks and Rec, all those are coming due to be reassessed.
we reassess Parks and Rec next year.
Sidewalk is a thing that will be reassessed next year.
And then lights,
We assess street maintenance, street lights, and oh, who was there? But,
okay,
yeah, so street maintenance and street lights, we look at every year, but those are not sunsetting. But we look at what we're charging, and we haven't changed it quite a while.
right, which is what I mean, to stay also current with our expenses and
Mhm.
ongoing things, so.
But yeah, they may have to go up just a little bit because,
Mhm.
the electric
And,
bill.
and school, everything has to go up, right? It's the cost of life right now, and I understand that.
It's a good faith effort on our part to start with this number. And then it's up to the other players on the other side of this to come back. And then it's gonna be up to the citizens of Shoto and of the county to vote and decide what we're gonna do.
And the difference coming out of the general fund would be $32,500.
Which is like one whole person's job in the city of Show.
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
taking care
so,
of people, right?
yes, but what I heard you say, and maybe I misheard you, was that I think you said $70,000 and it's less than half that. Okay, maybe.
Anyway,
I was doing the math in my head, so
It's like 87.
my numbers and your numbers. Anyway,
it's moving
but
fast.
it would be 32,500 out of the general fund for the first year, over and above what the contract would have been.
Okay.
So,
It's the numbers any higher than that. I'll have to say it has to go to levy.
well,
Yes.
and
Like,
I,
is that, okay, so what is are we not going to,
Well, we really can't
Recommend.
until we have a number. Till we have a number, the
Right.
sheriff's
Okay.
department agrees on,
And
we really
what's-
can't say we need a levy. 'cause we don't
Exactly.
know.
if they're good with the 215, we could fund that.
Mhm.
Starting in July, go for a year, but have the discussion starting in February next year. About, and then looking at hours that were used, et cetera, and if we go any higher than that, then looking at a levy or a special improvement district. And that would give us almost a year and a half between making the decision and the election to educate people on why we're asking for this money. So, thoughts, discussion.
So they're gonna come up with what services they're willing to provide for the 215.
We're going to take them a contract with what we are requesting for services for the 215.
Oh, you're good, first of all.
Yes, yes.
And then they'll have to come back and we'll have to reach an agreement.
Mhm.
So what services are you gonna put in, do you know?
We're not sure yet. That's what we gotta go
We-
over.
We're gonna go through, each of us go through this contract.
So that.
We're gonna amend what we want. We need to look at which ordinances that we believe are hard and fast. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But And then that will be, and then it's gotta go to the lawyer.
And those are from 2000.
This one was from 2017. I don't
And
have that
that's
page.
still no dog catcher, that's.
Right.
City code enforcement.
Right. Well, I would request some code
Well-
enforcement depending on code.
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, in some things that we have code, they could enforce it about as well as we can.
Yeah.
Just because there's no teeth anywhere in Montana code or federal code. So. Item number 2,
I think we should table that until we have a definitive number. I make a motion to table that until we have a definitive.
is, okay.
It's been a little while.
I've got them in my backpack. You want them? Actually,
Second.
okay, so it's been moved by Josh and moved by Councilmember Belanger, seconded by, what do you want me to call you? McCartney Duty? McCartney Duty? Okay.
Thank
And seconded by Councilmember McCartney Duty that we table item number 2, the discussion and possible vote on a recommendation of a voted levy or special assessment district. Is there any discussion? John? What? Because right now, what we're taking to the sheriff, we can afford to pay for. Without taxing the citizens anymore, we can afford to pay this recommendation that we've got tonight, the $215,000 a year.
We don't want to ask the citizens to write a check for a bill. We don't know what the number is yet.
Right. So if the sheriff comes back and says, absolutely not, that's not enough, then we have to look at it. But right now, we don't need more money from you, so we're not asking for more money from you.
Talk about the levy or the footage or whatever.
Yep, we're not talking about it because we don't need to do it right now. Yep,
So it's just on there if we needed it.
yep. That's why it says possible.
We're gonna try to cross that bridge without ever.
So
getting to it.
for
Yep.
the May,
We're
Next
trying not to
meeting,
spend more
should we
money.
come with ideas for that contract?
I think
Yes.
So we can
I-
have the official
Yep.
discussion of what goes in.
For the May meeting, first meeting in May, we need to come with our recommendations for this. And I can get copies of everything there for everybody.
Oh,
Page. Oh, I've got it.
Okay.
I took everything.
Okay.
Okay,
Here we go.
I'm trying to
Take
work
that.
it.
is there any other discussion? Those in favor of tabling the discussion and vote?
No, it's our, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Oh,
We got a thumbs up from Polly. Those opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Is there any public comment not on anything on the agenda? You will have 5 minutes and we do request that you come to the podium. Nope. Okay, motion to adjourn. Meeting adjourned at 6:29. We kept it under an hour. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Okay,